Great, thank you very much. Start with some wetland updates. Wetlands began flowing in April. Our flow rates have started to taper off a little bit as the season has gone on. The plants have started to senesce. We're starting to get into mid-fall. We're starting to get into winter, and so the natural filtration potential of our wetlands is starting to taper off. As a consequence of that, we're not able to move quite as much water as we were at the sort of peak height of the growing season and the summer. Currently, Prairie Creek and Beaver Creek moving about 500,000 gallons a day. Coldwater Creek is about 1 3/4 to 2 million gallon a day. And then Burntwood Creek, that pump has been off since early July. And so Burntwood Creek's only really able to grab stormwater only. Big Chickasaw Creek was flowing at about 3/4 million gallons a day up until this past week, and we've actually since turned that one off for the year. We do all this pump, turning these things up and turning these things down. We do all of this based on the nutrient concentrations and the nutrient data, and trying to balance the quantity of water with the quality of water. And as Dave Failer pointed out, we have had an unbelievably dry year. Dave, what was that rain total again to date? Did you say 21 inches and change?
Yeah,
21 and a half inches of rain, maybe some change. That is shockingly low. That is lower than it was last year. So we had an incredible drought last year. So if last year was an incredible drought, I'm not sure the adjective to describe this year. It's really, really low. One of the reasons our pumps are starting to taper off is not just the wetland vegetation starting to senesce and get ready for winter, but also water availability. We have to have water to actually pump. So we have seen that a lot of our pump wells have started to either look really low or gone dry completely. Burntwood Creek's a great example. This year we had to turn the pump off in early July, first week or so of July. And last year we were able to run that pump, I think, until late August, early September. So there was, every bit of 2 months of the sort of quote pumping season that was lost as a consequence of low stream levels. Now, there is a little bit of a blessing in that when you look at the purpose of these wetlands, it's multifaceted. Of course, these wetlands are great wildlife habitat. Of course, they're great for, us as the public to go out and walk around the trails and bird watch and things like that. But they're also meant to treat surface water runoff. So are they treating as much surface water runoff this year? We've had just really low water. So no, but there hasn't been as much surface runoff to actually treat. So proportionally, we might actually be doing better this year than we have in past years in terms of the fraction of the water that we're able to treat before it goes into Grand Lake. There's every possibility that we're doing a greater fraction this year than we have in the past, just as a consequence of there being much, much less water to actually treat. I expect all of the pumps to the wetlands to likely need to be turned off in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Certainly by the next time we talk in a month, those pumps will all be turned off for the year. But we had a good season. We had great concentration reductions. All in all, we are on track to surpass the pumping totals that we had last year. Unfortunately, because the water levels have been low enough, we have not been able to sort of get to, we had a goal when we started this year. We really wanted to get to 1 billion gallons of water pumped. That was a kind of a nice, cool, round number. We're going to get close to that, real close, but not quite get over that hump, I don't think. And that's just a consequence of just low water. But again, proportionally speaking, we're doing pretty well. We've seen thousands of pounds of phosphorus removed, tens of thousands of pounds of nitrogen, and 20, 30, 50,000 pounds of dirt removed from our surface waters before it got into Grand Lake. So it's been fantastic. And Teresa Dirksen was able to send me a couple of updates to share on her behalf. She's been instrumental in the Red Wing Nature Preserve project that Dave Failer was just talking about. Here's a overland drone photo of the project. And you've got the St. Mary's Boat Club and the Grand Lake Visitor Center there on the left of the image, and then the actual new wetland there on the right with the excavator in there. This is just a great photo. This will be the newest wetland in Grand Lake St. Mary's. This won't be the last wetland we restore, but this will be the newest one. The construction of this project started about September 2nd, and this whole project is around 15 to 16 acres, and as Dave mentioned, it's going to involve a pump system, and that pump was just installed like just this past week. It's going to take water from the lake, and that water will get pumped up to the top here, and then it'll flow back down, ultimately exiting back into the lake. So we're going to have water pumped from the lake. It'll get pumped through a force main right up here, and then it'll work its way back down and passively flow back into the lake. The other cool feature of this project is a little bit of stream restoration on that creek that's right there as well, so that'll be fantastic. This project, the goal is to probably do about 500,000 gallons a day. That's the goal. 500,000 gallons a day. The idea is to seed this just as soon as we possibly can, and then next year we'll start to see some life come out of it, and then over the years after that, it'll just get better and better. When we restore wetlands, typically it takes about 2 or 3 years for the veg to really take off. So next year it'll probably look pretty sparse, and the year after probably pretty sparse still. And then that third year, we see the wetland vegetation really just proliferate. So that'll be an amazing thing. So stay tuned for that, and certainly we're optimistic that those walking trails can be extended and connected with the existing Red Wing trails, so take advantage of those. All of these wetlands, they clean up surface water. They improve surface water quality. The hope is that our big water lake out there can realize some of these improvements. When we talk about lake improvements, we can talk about a lot of different metrics. There's a lot of different ways you can assess the, quote, health of a lake. One of the most common ways is to simply look at the algae biomass, the types of algae that are out there, as well as the toxins that those algae are producing. Here is a very, very recent, as of a couple of days ago, update on the toxin levels for this past year. The green dotted line represents this year. The solid black line represents the average by week over the last, it's well over a decade now. So you got a decade plus of weekly data averaged. So that's really, really low years and really, really high years, all averaged together. So that's your running average, and then the green line is where we're at. When we look at how we did this year, we have only been above the historical average twice. We have only been above the historical average 2 times. And one of those 2 times, we were pretty much at it. We weren't even that far above it. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a small spike get 10 or 15 micrograms per liter above the historical average. That was a consequence of just changing weather patterns, and the algae community is starting to senesce, and it's starting to die back. As that algae community starts to die back, it's going to release a lot of those toxins into the water column, and then eventually those dissipate and go away and break down. Hopefully that's what we're seeing. I'm optimistic that we're not going to see another massive, massive spike. We might see some bouncing. We might see it go up a little bit, but hopefully we're on a trajectory here that can take us into the winter. Currently, we are below the World Health Organization's advisory level. This is a big deal for us. We've been below the World Health Organization advisory level for the majority of this year, including some critical points of time during the recreation season. You can see this period right here. This is in the middle of summer. This was an exciting period because not only were we below the WHO's number, we were also below the number that we use in the state of Ohio, the number that we use all around the United States. So we were below that tick mark of 8 micrograms per liter, and that was a great thing. As I mentioned, when you look at the health of the lake, all these improvements are fantastic, but you got to keep an eye on the actual, the patient here. You got to keep an eye on the lake itself, and you got to have an idea of what sorts of things are you going to measure to assess how well these sorts of improvements are, going. Algae toxin levels are great data to have, and we're certainly seeing, phenomenal improvements in this toxin level data. Algae biomass how much algae is out there. That's great data to have. What we have been lacking for a very, very long time is we've been lacking a really good understanding of exactly what species of algae are out there and what species of algae are driving the lake. The harmful algal bloom that Grand Lake typically sees is almost exclusively dominated by Planktothrix. It's a cyanobacteria, and it's one that produces these microcystin toxins. But what we have seen over the last 4 or 5 years is as water quality levels have improved, we have started to see that there are increasingly large portions of the year where the alga community is not dominated by Planktothrix. Now, if you went out there right now, it's Planktothrix. And that's fine. That's good information to have. We know that. It's cyanobacteria. But again, there are really large portions of the year where it's not Planktothrix. It's a myriad of other algae, some of which are actually good algae to have. They help support the food web, and they're healthy algae to have. As we heard in some LAA announcements, the LAA has partnered with a number of local Rotary clubs, including the Salina Rotary Club, St. Mary's Rotary Club, like I said, a variety of local Rotary clubs. And the local Rotary clubs have secured funding in part through the national Rotary chapters, through the National Rotary Foundation, as well as the local foundations or the local chapters, as well as partnering with the Lake Improvement Association. So all of these groups have come together, and they have funded the acquisition of a new piece of scientific equipment that's going to automatically be able to categorize every species of algae in the water. You know, typically when you look at a sample of water, if you want to know what kind of algae is out there, it's painstaking work and it's under the microscope, and you know, you get a lot of good information, but it takes a long time to do that. And with the amount of information we need, it's kind of time prohibited. It's not, you're not able to really do it. With this new piece of equipment, is going to essentially shoot different wavelengths of light into a water sample, and based on what wavelengths of light get absorbed and what wavelengths don't get absorbed, it's going to categorize all of the different groups of algae that we have out there. Currently, what we can do really, really well is we can categorize how much of the lake is cyanobacteria. But that's just one group of algae. There's a whole lot of other ones out there. And like I said, up until the last 5 years, that's been enough, because our lake has been almost exclusively cyanobacteria. That's all you needed. It's not that anymore. We've started to see a regime shift in a lot of the alga community. And again, not right now in the dead of summer, but during the winter, during the early spring, we've started to see a regime shift in the alga community, and it's been really, really challenging to characterize that. This piece of equipment levels that playing field, and this piece of equipment is going to allow us as a community to get a better understanding of our natural resource. And every little bit of understanding that we can have helps us better predict, you know, what's coming down the line, what the future is going to bring. As we make more changes, what do these things look like? So we're really excited to get that piece of equipment online. We're optimistic that we can get that online in the first part of 2026, and we'll be bringing data to you all and explaining it and talking through it and saying, hey, this is the new alga community. So we're excited about that, and I am very, very appreciative, again, like I said, of the local Rotary chapters in this county, in Auglaize County. Very appreciative of the national chapter of Rotary, and then very appreciative of the LAA's continued support of these water quality initiatives. So with that, I'll take any questions if you got them. That's all I got. Thank you. Yes, sir.
This might be more of a question for Teresa, but I'm not a farmer, fan of agriculture, but with the harvest in full force right now, what follows is putting effluent on the ground or planting it in or whatever. And the drought that we had this year, I don't know what the timeline is, we can't put manure on the ground, December, whatever, watershed. That being said, all this, and all of a sudden we have a wet fall, wet winter, and all this sitting on the ground, does that runoff
Yeah, that was a great question and commentary, and I'm gonna paraphrase it a little bit so that we can all hear and the folks online can hear. But the question was, hey, we've had a really dry year. There has not been a ton of surface runoff going into the lake, and that's a good thing. But we are coming into a period of time right now, in accordance with the agronomic calendars, we are harvesting, and we are all fans of Ohio agriculture here because we all like to eat. We all have to eat, and this is an important part of our economy. The natural resource is also important, so we got to balance both. We got to have both. And so the question was, as we come into the harvest season, there will be a lot of manure application in Grand Lake watershed. There's a lot of manure application that's already started. You may have started to see piles of various and sundry manure types and flavors out there on the landscape. And those piles need to be worked in. That manure needs to be worked into the soil. And responsible manure management involves, a series of, applying manure at the right place, applying it at the right rate, applying it in the right way. And when you don't have any runoff happening, when you don't have any rain, that's a really good thing because it keeps the manure on the soil. It allows our producers time to work it in, and it allows that manure time to settle. If we were to get a massive rain event and there was a lot of manure that was in piles right next to the stream per se, that could potentially have an extremely negative impact. That could potentially load the system with a lot of nutrients. Some of those nutrients might get taken up by the algal community right now. Basically, the algal community right now is on the downswing. Could, with warm weather, so if we had a warm spell into October and we had runoff and we had nutrients, could that cause the algal community could rebound and could we see these toxin numbers go up? That's possible. That's not at all what we want. What we would like to see is that manure get incorporated so that it's not going to run off our landscape as quickly. And what we'd really like to see is not only for that manure to be incorporated, but for there to also be a cover crop put on top of that. That cover crop can help to stabilize those nutrients and help to lock those nutrients up in a biomass so that in the spring when the soils are worked a little bit and the crop can get planted, those nutrients are still there. What we don't want is those nutrients leaving the field and going into the lake. We want those nutrients to stay right there on the field because the idea is they're being put there so that the crop that goes in the spring can take it up. But again, it's a little bit of a game here. We have to hope that we don't have any pop-up storms, and we have to hope that our manure is applied in a sustainable way. Like I said, that manure needs to be applied at the right place, at the right time, and in the right way, and at the right rate. And those rates are informed by our soil testing data that comes to us from the distressed watershed rules that stipulate that producers that are managing over a certain number of acres have to have a handle on exactly what the nutrient levels are in their soils. And if those nutrient levels are too high, they are unable to apply in excess. That manure application window, as you mentioned, the last part of your commentary or question, that manure application window will close December 15th. December 15th is the beginning of the sort of manure application prohibition, and that will carry until March 1st. And so there'll be a lot of application post-harvest between now and then. And again, those 4 R's of responsible manure application and stewardship, we hope that those are followed across the board because those make a big difference. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.